At some point, usually late at night, a quiet thought appears. It does not shout, it does not panic. It simply asks, is this really the life I am supposed to be building? That question is dangerous, because once it appears, you cannot unhear it. You may be doing everything right. You may be responsible. You may be disciplined. You may be smart. And yet, this question keeps coming back. Not when things go wrong, but when things are fine. That is what confuses people the most. You are not failing. You are not lost in a dramatic way. Your life does not look broken from the outside, but inside, something feels unfinished. There is a strange emptiness that appears when effort no longer feels meaningful. You still work hard. You still show up. You still move forward. But the sense of direction is gone. You are moving, but you do not know toward what. This feeling often begins in your 30s, not because you suddenly become weak, but because the old structure disappears. In your 20s, life feels clear. Study harder, get better grades, find a job, improve your skills, move up. The steps are visible. The rewards are predictable. You know what to chase. But then something quietly changes. You reach a point where the rules stop guiding you. There is no obvious next level, no clear checklist. No one tells you what comes after. So, you keep doing what you were already doing. You stay busy, you stay productive, you stay responsible. But the deeper question remains unanswered. Why am I doing this? Smart people feel this confusion more deeply than others. Because intelligence is excellent at solving problems, so but terrible at answering questions about meaning. You can optimize your schedule. You can improve your productivity. You can increase your income and still feel lost. Because none of those things explain direction. They only explain movement. And movement without direction eventually feels exhausting. You start noticing small signs. Success feels shorter than it used to. Achievements feel lighter. Goals lose their emotional weight. You reach milestones that once mattered and feel strangely calm instead of excited. Not disappointed, just empty. That emptiness is uncomfortable. So, you explain it away. You tell yourself you should be grateful. You tell yourself this is normal. You tell yourself everyone feels this way. But the question does not disappear. It waits. It shows up in quiet moments. When you are alone. So when the noise fades. When there is nothing left to distract you. You begin to realize something unsettling. Your life was built on momentum, not intention. One decision led to another. One opportunity became a path. 1 year quietly turned into 5. And suddenly, you are living a life you never consciously chose. This realization hurts, because it forces you to face a truth most people avoid. You may have been chasing a borrowed definition of success, grades, titles, approval, stability. These things work when your identity is still forming, but they are weak foundations for a meaningful future. Eventually, they stop working. External rewards lose their power. Comparison stops motivating you. Validation feels temporary. And when that happens, people panic. They think something is wrong with them, so they push harder. They work more. They chase bigger goals. They add pressure. But pressure does not create direction. It only creates burnout. Here is what is rarely said. Feeling lost at this stage of life is not a failure. It is a signal that your inner system needs to be rebuilt. You have outgrown the identity that once guided you. The version of you that lived on external structure can no longer carry you forward. And this creates a gap between who you have been and who you need to become. This gap feels unstable because you cannot rush it. You cannot shortcut it. You cannot copy someone else's answer. That is why advice often feels empty. Follow your passion. Be grateful. Stay consistent. Trust the process. None of these solve the real problem. Because the real problem is not effort, it is alignment. You are applying intelligence to goals that no longer belong to you. And deep down, you know it. You feel it when progress feels hollow. You feel it when success feels quiet. You feel it when motivation fades for no clear reason. This is the moment where many people either wake up or slowly fall asleep inside their own lives. Some ignore the signal and keep going. Others panic and quit everything. Both paths lead to regret, because neither one asks the right question. The right question is not, "What should I do next?" It is, "What kind of life am I actually trying to build?" This question has no immediate answer, and that is why it is powerful. Because the people who eventually find direction are not the ones who move the fastest. They are the ones who stay honest with their confusion long enough to understand it. They stop forcing certainty. They stop chasing borrowed goals. And from that awareness, their direction slowly begins to change. Because once you start paying attention to how English actually works in real life, you realize something uncomfortable but important. Most people are not failing at English because they are lazy. They are failing because they were trained to aim at the wrong target. They were taught to collect grammar. They were taught to memorize structures. They were taught to translate thoughts instead of expressing them. And the world outside does not reward that kind of English. Real conversations move faster than grammar rules. Real meetings do not wait for perfect sentence structures. Real opportunities do not care how many tenses you remember. They care about one thing. Can you think clearly? And can you respond naturally under pressure? This is where future-ready English begins to separate itself from traditional learning. Future-ready English is not about sounding like a textbook. It is about sounding like a thinking human being. And thinking in English is not magic. It is a skill built from exposure, repetition, and emotional familiarity. Here is the part most people miss. Your brain does not learn language logically first. It learns emotionally first. You remember words that are attached to feelings. You remember phrases that appear in moments of tension, curiosity, relief, or surprise. You forget lists. You remember stories. That is why children learn faster. Not because they are smarter, but because language comes wrapped inside experience. When adults learn English, they usually strip the experience away. They isolate the language. They turn it into an object to analyze, and the brain resists. So the question is not, how many hours should I study English? The real question is, how many moments have I lived in English today? Did you hear English while thinking, not translating? Did you listen while imagining, not analyzing? Did you feel the rhythm of the language without stopping it? Future-ready English trains this exact ability. It teaches you how to stay inside the language long enough for your brain to relax. Because only when the brain relaxes does fluency begin. Fluency is not speed. Fluency is comfort. Think about your native language. You don't rush. You don't plan. You simply move from thought to sound. That state is what we are rebuilding, not copying. Rebuilding. And here is something most courses will never tell you. You don't need more vocabulary. You need deeper ownership of fewer words. A future-ready speaker can use simple words to explain complex ideas. An unready speaker hides behind advanced words and still feels insecure. Which one do you think employers, clients, and international teams trust more? This is why we slow down. Not because slow is weak, but because slow is accurate. When you slow your listening, your brain starts predicting. When you slow your speaking, your confidence stabilizes. When you slow your learning, your retention explodes. Let me ask you something honestly. When you listen to English now, are you listening to understand? Or are you listening to catch mistakes in yourself? Because those are two very different mental states. One builds fluency, the other builds anxiety. Future Ready English removes the fear loop. You are not here to perform. You are here to think. And thinking in English does not require perfection. It requires permission. Permission to pause. Permission to sound simple. Permission to be human. Once that permission exists, something powerful happens. Your listening improves before your speaking. Your intuition grows before your accuracy. Your confidence appears quietly without effort. This is why the structure of this channel matters. We don't rush lessons. We don't overload rules. We let patterns repeat until they feel familiar. Because the future does not reward people who know English. It rewards people who can use English while solving problems. In meetings, in interviews, in difficult conversations, in moments where there is no time to prepare. And that ability is trained here, sentence by sentence, idea by idea. You may not feel dramatic progress after one video. That is normal. But one day, you will notice something strange. You will respond in English without translating. You will understand without replaying. You will speak without rehearsing. And that is the moment you realize your English is no longer something you are learning. It is something you are using. So stay with the process. Stay inside the language. Let your brain adapt at its own speed. Because the goal was never to sound impressive. The goal was to be ready. Because being ready does not mean feeling confident all the time. It means being able to function even when confidence is not present. Most people wait for confidence before they speak. Future-ready speakers speak first, and confidence follows later. That is a critical shift. Confidence is not a prerequisite, it is a byproduct. When you stop demanding perfect English from yourself, your brain stops panicking. When the panic disappears, clarity enters. And clarity is far more useful than perfection. This is why so many intelligent people sound less capable in English than they truly are. Their thinking is strong, their ideas are sharp, but the mental pressure blocks the signal. English becomes a filter instead of a bridge. Future-ready English removes that filter, not by lowering standards, but by changing the order of learning. First comes meaning. Then comes structure. Then comes refinement. Most traditional systems reverse that order. They demand structure first, and people freeze. Let's look at how real professionals use English. They don't search for the best word. They choose the available word and move forward. They don't restart sentences. They adjust them midway. They don't apologize for accents. They focus on clarity. And here is the truth no one tells learners. Native speakers are not impressed by perfect grammar. They are impressed by calm communication. Calm tells them you are competent. Calm tells them you understand the situation. Calm tells them you can be trusted under pressure. Future-ready English trains calm. That is why silence is not treated as failure here. Pauses are not mistakes. They are thinking space. When you allow pauses, your brain stays online. When you rush, your brain shuts down. Think about the future environments you are preparing for: remote meetings, cross-cultural teams, fast decision-making, unclear instructions, high-stakes conversations. In those moments, English is not the main challenge. Cognitive load is. You are processing information, reading emotions, evaluating risks, and responding diplomatically all at the same time. Future-ready English respects that reality. It does not overload your working memory. It simplifies language so your thinking can remain complex. This is why simple sentences are powerful. They survive stress. They survive noise. They survive uncertainty. Complex sentences collapse under pressure. Let me ask you another honest question. When you imagine your future self using English, do you imagine sounding impressive, or do you imagine feeling capable? Those two images lead to very different learning paths. One creates anxiety, the other creates growth. Here, we choose capability. Capability means you can explain a problem even if your vocabulary is limited. Capability means you can ask for clarification without feeling small. Capability means you can disagree politely without rehearsing for hours. And this is where listening becomes the foundation. Not passive listening, active presence. You listen not to understand every word, but to follow the direction of thought. Meaning flows before language. Always. That is why slow, clear English is not a weakness. It is a training ground. You are teaching your brain how ideas move, how arguments form, how explanations unfold. Once your brain understands the map, speed comes naturally. Trying to force speed first only creates fear. Future-ready English never fights the brain. It works with it. And this is important to remember. Some progress in this approach is often invisible at first. You feel normal. Nothing dramatic happens. Until one day, you realize you are no longer afraid of English moments. You don't avoid calls. You don't delay emails. You don't overthink simple replies. English stops being a test. It becomes a tool. And tools are meant to be used, not admired. That is the quiet transformation happening here. You are not becoming a different person in English. You are becoming the same person, with fewer obstacles. So if at times this feels too simple, too slow, too calm, that is a good sign. It means your brain is finally learning the way it was designed to learn. And once that foundation is stable, everything else becomes easier. And when the foundation is stable, the real test begins. Because the future will not ask you to speak English in ideal conditions. It will ask you to use English while making decisions. Decisions under uncertainty. Decisions with incomplete information. Decisions that affect other people. This is where many learners collapse. Not because their English is bad, but because their thinking and language are fighting each other. Future-ready English aligns thinking with expression. You don't translate thoughts. You release them. You don't wait for the perfect sentence. You move with the idea. This matters deeply in professional environments. In meetings, people don't remember exact words. They remember direction. Who understood the problem? Who clarified the confusion? Who helped the group move forward? Those roles are filled by thinkers, not speakers. And English is simply the medium. Here is something subtle but powerful. When your English is simple and calm, people assume your thinking is structured. When your English is rushed and complex, people assume uncertainty. That perception affects trust. Future-ready communication optimizes for trust. It favors clarity over cleverness, direction over decoration, presence over performance. Think about high-pressure moments, an unexpected question, a disagreement, a sudden responsibility. In those moments, the brain prioritizes survival, not grammar. If your English training depends on perfect conditions, it disappears. But if your English is built on patterns of thought, it stays. That is why we focus on functional language. Language that helps you explain, clarify, reframe, decide, conclude, not impress. And here is a key realization. So you don't need advanced English to lead. You need stable English. Leaders across the world use limited vocabulary, but they use it consistently. Consistency creates authority. People follow clarity, not complexity. This is why repetition is not boring here. It is intentional. When phrases repeat, they embed. When structures repeat, they stabilize. When ideas repeat, they become automatic. Automation frees cognitive space, and that space is what you use to think. Future-ready English trains automaticity in essentials. So when pressure rises, language does not consume energy. It supports you. Let me ask you something important. When you speak English in serious situations, do you feel like you are managing language or managing the situation? If language is the problem, everything else becomes heavier. If language is stable, you can focus on outcomes. That shift changes careers. People who are future-ready are not louder. They are clearer. They don't dominate conversations. They guide them. They don't rush to speak. They wait for the moment that matters. And when they speak, the room listens. Not because of accent, not because of advanced vocabulary, but because what they say moves things forward. This is the skill that survives automation. This is the skill that survives AI tools. This is the skill that survives changing industries. Clear human communication. And English is the shared platform. So as you continue this journey, remember what you are actually building. Not English ability. Decision-making ability in English. And once that is in place, new roles open. New responsibilities appear. New confidence grows quietly. So you don't chase the future. You become ready for it. And this is where everything quietly comes together. Because being future-ready is not about predicting what will happen. It is about being stable no matter what happens. The world is moving faster. Tools are changing. Roles are shifting. Certainties are disappearing. English in that world is no longer a subject. It is infrastructure. It supports thinking. It supports collaboration. It supports adaptation. People who struggle in the future are not those with weak English. They are those whose English collapses under change. That is the difference. Future-ready English does not depend on memorized excellence. It depends on internal stability. You don't freeze when the topic changes. You don't panic when you don't know a word. So you don't shut down when things become uncomfortable. You stay present. And presence is the rarest skill today. Let's return to the questions we have been circling around since the beginning. Why do some people study English for years and still hesitate to speak? Because they trained accuracy without training safety. Their brain never learned that English is a safe space to think. Why do some people sound confident with simple English? Because confidence comes from direction, not decoration. They know where they are going with their ideas. And why does Future Ready English focus so much on calm, slow, and clarity? Because calm keeps the brain online, slow creates precision, clarity builds trust. Those three together form real fluency, not fluency for tests, fluency for life. At some point, English stops being something you improve. It becomes something you rely on. You rely on it to explain yourself, to negotiate, to lead, to connect. And when that happens, you are no longer chasing progress. Progress follows you. This channel exists for that exact transition, not to overwhelm you, not to impress you, but to help your brain rebuild its relationship with English, step by step, sentence by sentence, idea by idea. If you've listened this far, you already understand something important. You don't need to rush. You don't need to compare. You don't need to sound like anyone else. You just need to stay inside the language long enough for it to become yours. And if this way of learning feels different, that's because it is. It respects how adults think, how professionals operate, how futures are built. So if this series helped you feel calmer, clearer, or more capable in English, take a moment to support the channel. Like the video. Subscribe to English and Future Ready. It tells the algorithm that this kind of learning matters, and it gives me the energy to create more content that helps you stay ready for whatever comes next.